IB European history students, I'm just going to address one question on the 1848 revolutions questions. I spent a lot of time grading your charts, the ideologies charts or the matrix, and a lot of you did, all of you did really good work. But one thing to point out about assignments, do look at the comments. I take a lot of time and try to make comments as a way for us to have some interaction that we don't get in the classroom as much as we probably need to. So that's the way to do it. So if you don't understand something that I write or feedback that I'm giving you, just reach out to me. We can do it by and some of you already are. We can do it by email. You can contact me through Schoology. You can contact me through Remind. I mean, there's all these different avenues to do it. Text me. I've talked to guys on the phone. It's great, but just do it. If you don't understand something, reach out. Okay. So as people are finishing up this particular assignment, this is the last one of this cycle. Let's look at number 4. So this reading was mostly about the events in France of 1848. There's a little bit about Austria and a little bit about Prussia, but most of the reading and most of the questions are about France. And in France, in February of 1848, the king of France, his name was Louis Philippe. He abdicated. He stepped down. And he stepped down because the conditions all around Europe were awful, and there's revolution everywhere. There was this growing number of people who wanted a say in government that were being mobilized by the liberal movement. There were people living in urban areas who were struggling with early industrialization. Maybe they were unemployed. Maybe they weren't getting paid enough. On top of that, there's a famine. So there are all these problems. And Louis Philippe abdicated because he was becoming so unpopular, and clearly a change was needed. So between the time of his abdication in early February and the time of the election that would take place in France in April, there was what they described as an executive committee that would kind of see the transition through. And it was within this executive committee that we see the ideologies begin to clash. And the two most prominent ideologies on that committee were described in the reading as moderate Republicans, the moderates. And if you think about ideology, moderate Republicans in this case were liberals. They saw the king's abdication and some of the steps that they took immediately, like establishing a 10-hour workday, and they freed slaves in some of the French colonies. I mean, some of those steps that they took immediately, moderates saw as enough, as their goal, as achievement of their goal. The other faction within that executive committee were described as radical Republicans. Radical Republicans, led by Louis Blanc, were socialists, and they believed that the government in general needed to take concrete steps to solve the problems of the urban working poor, problems of poverty, and unemployment, high unemployment, and dangerous working conditions, and all these things. So what Louis Blanc and what were described as radicals on the executive committee, what they wanted to do was create a right to work program. They wanted to create a program that employed Parisians through the government. And the rest of the reading talks about what would happen once that was implemented, what happened in the April elections to change really the direction that the committee was beginning to go in. And then inevitably, maybe not inevitably, but ultimately, what happens at the end in December when Louis Napoleon, who later becomes Napoleon III, wins executive authority through a December election.